The air around the VA system right now is thick with anxiety. And if you're a veteran or someone supporting a veteran, you've probably felt that tension building. We've been hearing whispers, seeing the official announcements, and the bottom line is this. The Department of Veterans Affairs has quietly rolled out a new series of policy adjustments and administrative directives that are causing widespread nervousness across the community. These aren't minor tweaks. They represent shifts in how claims are processed, how benefits are maintained, and how the entire system interacts with the very people it's designed to serve. The fundamental question hanging over every veteran's head is simple. Are these changes designed to streamline the process, or are they subtle mechanisms intended to tighten the purse strings and make accessing earned benefits significantly harder? We are going to break down the 8 most critical shifts happening right now, the ones that are genuinely keeping veterans up at night, and explain exactly why they matter to your future and your financial security. The first major wave of anxiety stems from what the VA is calling enhanced evidence scrutiny, but what veterans interpret as a massive tightening of the Q nexus requirement. For those unfamiliar, the nexus is the crucial link, the bridge of evidence, connecting your current disability directly back to your time in service. Historically, the VA operated under a duty to assist, meaning they often helped secure records and sometimes offered a degree of leniency, especially when dealing with older, harder-to-prove claims or conditions stemming from environmental exposures. Now, however, the new internal directives emphasize a much higher bar for independent medical opinions and objective evidence. It's no longer enough to simply have a service-connected event and a current diagnosis. The VA is mandating that the medical nexus statement must be unequivocally clear, utilizing language that goes beyond "it is possible" and demands "it is more likely than not." This change impacts everyone, but it hits veterans with presumptive conditions, like those related to Agent Orange exposure or the PACT Act conditions, particularly hard because while the law might presume the exposure happened, the VA is now demanding stricter medical documentation showing that the current specific disability is directly traceable to that exposure, even if it falls under the presumptive umbrella. The fear here is institutionalized skepticism. Veterans worry that claims examiners, under pressure to reduce error rates and speed up processing, will default to denying claims that lack the absolute gold standard of evidence, even when that evidence is inherently difficult to obtain decades after service. This shift places a significant and often expensive burden on the veteran to hire private medical experts or independent doctors who understand the granular language the VA now requires, transforming the claims process from an administrative review into a quasi-legal battle where the quality of your expert witness dictates success. This focus on hyper-specific medical language creates a labyrinth for veterans who rely on general practitioners or VA doctors who are often hesitant to write the definitive, service connection-affirming nexus letter required by the new, demanding criteria. The ripple effect is already showing up in longer processing times for claims that require this enhanced level of review, forcing veterans into a holding pattern of financial uncertainty while they scramble to meet an evidence standard that feels impossibly high. Moving from the initial claim to sustained benefits, the second critical rule change causing significant distress involves the increased scrutiny of permanent and total P&T status. P&T status is the bedrock of security for many severely disabled veterans. It signifies that the VA recognizes their conditions are unlikely to improve, granting them peace of mind that their compensation will not be subject to routine reevaluations. The new directives, however, have introduced formalized protocols for reviewing P&T designations, even those previously considered sacrosanct. While the VA claims this is only targeting cases where medical evidence suggests a reasonable expectation of improvement, perhaps due to new medical treatments or surgical interventions, the veterans community sees this as opening a floodgate for unnecessary reexaminations. The inherent anxiety comes from the subjective nature of determining reasonable expectation. A veteran who has been stable for 10 or 15 years, relying on the guarantee of P and T status to manage their life and finances, is now facing the terrifying possibility of being called back for a compensation and pension C&P exam. These exams are stressful, often brief, and conducted by examiners who may not have a deep, longitudinal understanding of the veteran's complex history. The fear isn't just the loss of benefits, it's the profound psychological toll of having to relitigate their entire medical history, proving their permanent disability, again, after believing that chapter was closed. Furthermore, this policy change seems to disregard the fact that many service-connected conditions, particularly mental health issues or complex orthopedic problems, fluctuate dramatically. A veteran might be stable for a year, but a mandatory re-exam during a period of temporary stability could lead an examiner to downgrade their rating, initiating a lengthy and emotionally draining appeal process just to restore the status they already earned. This perceived erosion of the permanence of P and T status undermines the trust veterans place in the VA system, transforming what was meant to be a secure outcome into a conditional one, subject to arbitrary administrative review cycles. The sheer volume of potential re-reviews, even if only a fraction result in rating reductions, threatens to overwhelm the already strained C and P examination system, creating bottlenecks that delay initial claims for everyone else. The third area of intense concern centers on the digital transition and mandatory online claim submission, coupled with new cybersecurity and data privacy regulations that veterans find confusing and intrusive. The VA is aggressively pushing toward a fully digitized claims environment, strongly encouraging and in some cases subtly mandating that veterans use the va.gov portal for all major interactions, including submitting new claims and supplemental evidence. While the efficiency gains are undeniable for the VA, this transition disproportionately affects older veterans and those in rural areas with limited access to reliable high-speed internet or the necessary technological literacy. The VA's new emphasis on digital security also means that authentication processes are becoming more complex, involving multi-factor authentication and rigorous identity verification protocols that frequently lock out veterans who struggle with technology or who have changed addresses or phone numbers multiple times. The fear here is twofold: digital exclusion and data vulnerability. Veterans worry that if they cannot navigate the complicated digital landscape, their claims will be perpetually stuck in administrative limbo or simply rejected for incomplete submission. Furthermore, the massive centralization of highly sensitive medical and personal data into a single, massive government database raises immediate cybersecurity alarms. The VA has implemented new, stringent data sharing and access rules, but the constant stream of high-profile data breaches in both government and private sectors leaves veterans deeply suspicious of the system's ability to protect their most personal information. They are being forced to choose between the convenience of digital processing and the very real risk of identity theft, or the unauthorized release of their service-related health history. The required digital signatures and electronic records also complicate the use of traditional veteran service officers, VSOs, who often rely on paper trails and in-person consultations, inadvertently creating a barrier between veterans and their most trusted advocates. Next, we must address the significant structural changes within the Appeals Modernization Act AMA system, specifically the new directives regarding evidence introduction and the perceived bottleneck in the higher-level review HLR lane. The AMA, introduced to replace the decades-old agonizingly slow legacy appeals system, promised faster decisions through three distinct lanes: supplemental claim, higher-level review, and board appeal. However, the new administrative rules are clarifying and, in some veterans' eyes, restricting the use of the HLR lane. The HLR is designed for quick review by a senior claims adjudicator, based only on the evidence that existed when the previous decision was made. The new VA guidance is emphasizing with increasing strictness that any attempt to sneak in new evidence during the HLR will result in the claim being immediately shifted to the slower supplemental claim lane, essentially delaying the resolution and wasting valuable time. While this seems logical on the surface, the anxiety stems from the inherent complexity of the VA decision letters themselves. Veterans often misunderstand what evidence was actually considered in the initial decision, or they may have submitted evidence that was improperly indexed or lost by the VA. The new rigid interpretation of the HLR rules means that an honest mistake, a veteran believing the VA simply overlooked a document that was actually missing, can result in an immediate procedural penalty. This forces veterans into a confusing and unforgiving procedural dance where a single misstep can add months or even a year to their appeal timeline. Furthermore, there are growing reports that the sheer volume of HLR requests is overwhelming the senior adjudicators, leading to de facto bottlenecks that contradict the AMA's promise of speed. Veterans are nervous that the system, designed to be flexible and efficient, is becoming overly bureaucratic and punitive toward those who are not procedural experts, effectively pushing them toward the lengthy and complex board appeal process, which is exactly what the AMA was supposed to minimize. The fifth major cause for veteran concern involves significant updates to the fiduciary program oversight and beneficiary autonomy. For veterans deemed unable to manage their own financial affairs, often due to severe mental health conditions or cognitive impairments, the VA appoints a fiduciary to manage their benefits. While this program is vital for protection, the VA has recently introduced much stricter, more intrusive oversight rules regarding how fiduciaries operate and how beneficiaries are assessed. The new rules demand more frequent, detailed reporting from fiduciaries, which is generally positive for preventing fraud, but they also introduce a new level of scrutiny on the veteran's capacity assessment. Veterans are worried that these enhanced oversight mechanisms will inadvertently lead to more veterans being unnecessarily classified as financially incompetent, stripping them of their autonomy and control over their hard-earned compensation. The criteria for determining financial competency are subjective and often rely heavily on VA examiners who may not have specialized psychological training, leading to inconsistent and potentially biased determinations. The fear is that the VA, seeking to minimize risk and liability associated with mishandled funds, will err on the side of caution and assign fiduciaries even in borderline cases, treating the veteran as a ward of the state, rather than a fully capable individual who simply needs minor support. This loss of control is deeply demoralizing and can exacerbate existing mental health struggles. Moreover, the new rules also place greater restrictions on who can serve as a fiduciary, sometimes excluding trusted family members or friends due to stringent background checks or financial disclosure requirements, forcing veterans to rely on professional or institutional fiduciaries who charge fees, thereby reducing the net benefit received by the veteran. The intention may be protection, but the outcome for many is a feeling of infantilization and loss of fundamental financial freedom. A particularly sensitive and complex issue is the sixth major rule adjustment, focusing on the refined criteria for dependency and indemnity compensation DIC eligibility for surviving spouses. DIC is a lifeline for military families whose service member died from a service-connected disability or during active duty. The new VA directives are tightening the evidentiary requirements regarding the cause of death and the length of the marriage, particularly in cases where the veteran was P&T for a significant period before passing away. While the existing law requires the marriage to have lasted at least 8 continuous years immediately prior to the death if the veteran was P&T for that duration, the new internal guidance is emphasizing hyper-specific documentation proving continuous cohabitation and financial interdependence. The worry is that minor administrative gaps, such as a temporary separation or a lack of specific joint financial records decades after the marriage began, could be used to deny benefits to surviving spouses who are already navigating profound grief and financial instability. Furthermore, the VA is now applying stricter scrutiny to medical opinions linking the veteran's service-connected conditions to the ultimate cause of death, especially when the death certificate lists a complex or non-immediate cause. If the veteran died of a heart attack, but they were service-connected for hypertension and PTSD, the VA is now demanding an exceptionally strong medical nexus, often requiring an autopsy or detailed medical records that are difficult for the surviving spouse to obtain quickly. This elevated burden of proof feels cruel and unnecessary to many surviving families, forcing them to fight for benefits they believe should be automatically granted, given the veteran's established service connection. The underlying fear is that these changes are designed to reduce the number of eligible DIC recipients by creating procedural hurdles too high for grieving spouses to clear without expensive legal assistance, effectively shifting the burden of proof onto the most vulnerable claimants. The seventh major point of contention and nervousness involves the accreditation and scrutiny of third-party representatives, VSOs, and claims agents. Recognizing the systemic problem of predatory claims sharks who charge illegal fees for assisting with VA claims, the VA has introduced new aggressive accreditation standards and oversight rules. While the goal of protecting veterans from exploitation is universally supported, the execution of these new rules is causing collateral damage. The new requirements for mandatory continuous training, higher standards for ethical conduct, and increased financial disclosure are inadvertently creating burdens for legitimate, volunteer-based veteran service organizations, VSOs, and smaller, nonprofit groups. These groups often operate on shoestring budgets and rely on dedicated volunteers who may not have the time or resources to comply with the constant barrage of new administrative and training mandates. The fear is that the VA's crackdown, while aiming at the bad actors, will ultimately reduce the number of available, free, and trusted resources for veterans. If VSOs are forced to dedicate more time to compliance and less time to claims preparation, the overall capacity of the free support system shrinks, leaving veterans with only two choices: navigate the increasingly complex system alone, or hire an expensive, accredited attorney or claims agent. This creates a two-tiered system where veterans with financial resources can secure expert help quickly, while those without are left struggling. Furthermore, the new rules give the VA greater latitude to investigate and potentially decertify representatives based on subjective criteria related to professional conduct, leading some legitimate VSOs to worry about overreach and arbitrary enforcement, potentially chilling their advocacy efforts on behalf of veterans who desperately need aggressive representation. Finally, the eighth critical area causing veteran anxiety is the subtle but significant shift in the criteria and documentation for aid and attendance A and A benefits. A and A is a supplementary benefit designed to help low-income veterans and surviving spouses pay for necessary in-home or facility care. The VA has not drastically changed the income and asset limits, but the new directives focus heavily on the quality and necessity of the care being provided. Specifically, the VA is now requiring much more granular, physician-certified documentation proving the precise level of assistance needed, e.g., help with activities of daily living, ADLS. Veterans are finding that generic doctor's notes stating the need for some assistance are being rejected. The VA now demands detailed logs, specific diagnoses related to the need for care, and a clear correlation between the service-connected condition or age-related need for surviving spouses and the inability to perform specific tasks. The nervousness stems from the inherent difficulty in consistently documenting chronic care needs. Caregivers, often family members, are not professional note-takers, and doctors are frequently reluctant to spend the extensive time required to document every minute detail of a patient's daily functional limitations. This administrative hurdle effectively creates a delay mechanism, forcing veterans who need immediate financial support for care into a bureaucratic loop while they try to satisfy the VA's highly specific documentation requirements. Furthermore, there are growing concerns about the VA's application of the look-back period for asset transfers, designed to prevent applicants from artificially lowering their net worth just to qualify. While the look-back rules have existed, the new enforcement directives are more aggressive, requiring detailed financial disclosures spanning several years, which many elderly applicants find overwhelming, intrusive, and incredibly difficult to compile, leading to the rejection of otherwise legitimate claims based purely on administrative inability to produce exhaustive historical financial records. These 8 interconnected changes, the hyper-scrutiny of the nexus, the uncertainty surrounding P and T status, the mandatory digital pivot, the unforgiving appeal structure, the loss of autonomy in fiduciary management, the heightened burden on surviving spouses for DIC, the shrinking pool of free advocates, and the rigorous documentation demands for A&A collectively paint a picture of a VA system that is becoming increasingly automated, technically demanding, and risk-averse. The overarching fear is not just about bureaucratic inefficiency. It's the profound concern that the VA is prioritizing institutional efficiency and fiscal protection over the supportive, veteran-centric mission it was founded upon. Veterans feel they are being treated as claimants to be vetted, rather than heroes to be supported. The path forward demands vigilance, meticulous documentation, and proactive engagement with the system. If you take one thing away from this, let it be this: never assume your claim or status is safe, and always, always document everything with the highest level of medical specificity possible. The VA has changed the rules of engagement, and to succeed, veterans must adapt to this new, more rigorous battlefield of paperwork and procedure.